Welcome everyone to our second webinar, Fundraising Sustainability One-on-One. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's session, focused on fundraising sustainability as part of the Training Institute for tenants and residents. My name is Dee Ross. I am leading the Training Institute for Tenants and Residents, and I am National Low Income Housing Coalition Tenant Leader Fellow. And before we jump into today's webinar, I just want to remind everyone a little bit about the Training Institute. And so the Training Institute is a national initiative created to equip tenants, residents, and grassroots leaders with the tools to organize, advocate, and win lasting change in their communities. We believe that those most impacted by housing injustice should be the ones leading the movement for housing justice. Over the course of this institute, we've been building collective power through education, storytelling, and strategic skill building. Today's focus is all about helping tenant leaders like you build sustainable funding strategies and learn how to resource your movements for the long haul. We're so glad you're here. Let's continue building together. And we're going to move on to the next slide, and I will be introducing my fellow colleagues we have today, Benja Reilly and Cecily Thomas. They are our fund development coordinators. So welcome, Cecily and Benja. Feel free to take it away.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? I think so. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So this is the Fundraising and Sustainability 101. It's going to be me and Benja. We are fund development coordinators here at NLIHC. We're really excited to give you a great presentation today. I'll let Benja introduce himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Benja Reilly. I'm a development coordinator here at NLIHC, and welcome. We're so excited to see you all in the chat and to see where everyone's coming, calling in from. So we just want to, level set initially, and sort of talk about some of the takeaways for this session. So ultimately, we're providing an overview of how to, get started with fundraising, insights into different types of fundraising initiatives that you can pursue, via your size of your organization. And then thirdly, really share best practices and how to cultivate long-lasting partnerships with your donor base. And then lastly is provide creative ways to engage and involve your community and stakeholders. One thing I do want to touch upon, and I know Cecily will also talk about this, is around some of the things we won't touch on. So we will not be discussing specifically recovering lost funding from government grants. And also, we won't be necessarily discussing the logistics for grant compliance. But if you do have any questions, as we know, this is a 101. We're going to keep it pretty high level. I'm sure, as you all know, fundraising can be very, very deep topic. So if you have any questions or things that you want to pursue further, feel free to let Dee know. But I'll let Cecily address the next slide.
Yeah, so we just wanted to kind of address the elephant in the room. We know that a lot of organizations across the country are facing really difficult times, especially with these massive funding cliffs that organizations are facing due to grants no longer being available to them, and massive funding cuts, and also just, organizations, philanthropy organizations shifting their priorities and pulling grants and pulling funding. So we want to recognize that it is a really hard time to fundraise right now, but we hope that this presentation will equip you with some tools and some best practices to help you sustain your organization. But like Ben just said, we are not going to go into any government grant compliance, state grant compliance, any government federal grant compliance. That's not really our expertise. NLIHC does not take any federal grants. This is just a very high level presentation about fundraising. So I'll hand it off to Benja to talk about fundraising.
Sure. So the first thing we want to talk about is what is fundraising? So next slide. Sure. So for the purposes of our presentation today, we're really going to think about fundraising as securing the resources needed to achieve a shared vision. And we purposely wanted to highlight the term resources here because we recognize that, ideally in some cases, financial resources would be the most optimal. However, there are other ways to connect and form partnerships that aren't necessarily financial in nature. So a good example would be volunteer opportunities, shared publicity with funders, providing connections with other funders via some of your donor base, and also engaging in thought partnerships. So you just wanted to be sort of visionary in our thinking around resources here. Secondly, so fundamentally, fundraising is really about building strong relationships. And we're definitely going to dive more deeper into that later on. And then lastly, so we also want to recognize that within a movement, there are different roles that need to be played, and fundraising certainly holds an important role, but isn't necessarily the most important one. So I think a useful way that I like to think about fundraising is really to create fans of your work. So these are folks who they're willing to go out there and sort of root for you no matter what, folks who believe in your work and they really want to tell others about the kinds of work that you're doing and really rally people around your work. So I think a good way to take that even further is thinking of a sports team. So you have a coaching staff, which you can envision is kind of your operations team. You have your players, which might be your program staff, and then you also have your fan base. And all three of these kind of need to support each other to have an effective, strategy and a winning team. So just think about it that way as you're really trying to create a nice, supporter section or fan base for your organization. Next slide. So yeah, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into relationship building. It's important to put this at the onset of the call, we thought, because it's really core to all types of fundraising. So networking and relationship building are translatable skills from organizing to fundraising. I want to help you folks realize that many of you are already experts at relationship building. You're already successfully working in your own communities. You've already successfully convinced folks why your admission is important, what the solutions are. You really are the program experts in that, and you're really good at already doing that. Fundraising isn't necessarily different. However, there are a few different ways and skills that you might need to work with and convince donors to join your work and to be a part of that. So the first one would be treating current and prospective funder relationships as partnerships, not as transactions. So really seek to build relationships with your funders that aren't one way. You should be working with them frequently on what's working, what's not, what are the challenges you're facing, what are some of the risks to your work. It's very important to want to be candid and realistic about your goals and objectives. And also for prospective donors that you have contact with and you're trying to court and work with, make sure that they also are kept up to date on what you're doing. Secondly, build strong relationships and navigate difficult times with funders and donors, especially right now, for example. If a funder, says no to a request one year, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a no for the next year. Or if you run into a funder that has to dial back their funding for one year, remember these are long-term, multi-dimensional partnerships, and there are different ways that you can support and bolster each other. And the strength of that relationship really matters to weather tough times together. And then secondly, know your audience. So it's really important to be realistic and deeply understand the funders and donor base that you're working with. What are their priorities? What are their goals? For foundations, community foundations especially, where do they see themselves in 5 years? And specifically, how does your organization's work help them to sort of realize their priorities and their goals? And I will touch on sort of research and prospecting new funders, and some of the work that is being done on that front end really helps make this connection stronger and more clear. And you're really just trying to build fans of the work. So think of it that way. And then I think we have a slide we're introducing. Sorry, a poll we're introducing in the chat. So feel free to just, yes or no, have you ever fundraised for your organization? I'll give it a few more seconds just to hit yes or no on that poll. All right. Why don't we move on to the next slide then? And we'll release the, oh, there's the results. There we are. So we have, oh, my results disappeared. There we are. So the yes was 46% of you all have fundraised for your organization, and the no is 54% of you all. So just to sort of gauge the room. All right, next slide, please. Sure. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you fundraise and some of the, initial legwork that should happen, sort of before you even start to fundraise. There's a lot of legwork that does need to happen. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of you really are the experts in your fields, in your communities, with your specific programs. So I'm not necessarily going to dwell too much on program design. However, I do want to raise some questions that I think you can ask yourself, you can ask your staff to really help capture the essence of your work and to sort of step outside the complexity of some of these issues that you're facing day to day. And really, the more effort and time that you're putting into answering a lot of these questions and practicing, the easier these conversations will become with donors, with funders. So really try your best to get these things straight. So, and the aim of these questions is to really provide a springboard for you. So with the hopes of creating sort of an elevator pitch. So if you're meeting someone at a conference in line for food and they have no idea about who you are and your work and you maybe have a few minutes, hopefully they'll leave that conversation knowing what you do, why you do it, and why it's an important issue and ultimately how they can be involved. And it's really important in these conversations to be convincing. You're trying to convince people why these things are important, why they should join with you. So first things first. So clarify your mission. So what is the problem you're seeking to solve? It's very helpful to lay this out very plainly for folks. Secondly is why is this problem important? So who does it impact? How does it impact different communities? Who are some of the stakeholders and why is it important? Thirdly would be how do you seek to solve it? So what methods is your organization employing or is your community employing to try to solve these issues? And really spelling that out can be very important. And then the fourth one is why are you the best positioned? So really, I know Cecily will talk about this further on, but what makes your organization the ones best primed to make progress on these solutions? Really, what is your expertise? What is the context? What is some of the historical context that really makes your organization the best position to do it? So the second bullet point is set realistic programmatic goals. So, what does success look like? So work backwards from this. In an ideal world in which this problem is no longer exists, what are some of the things what would have to have happened? How did you get there? What needs to change? Who needs to be on board? Create a vision of the world and really think about your organization's theory of change and how things connect to each other. Secondly is measuring impact, measuring impact, excuse me. So make sure you're thinking deeply about your program's impacts and your wins. Creating sort of a feedback loop is extremely important to improving your program itself and to seeing where you're maybe not necessarily meeting your goals and where you can do better. And also, additionally, it's important to relay impact to your donor base. Folks want to know where their money's going, what their money's going towards, and having really good program tracking and measuring impact can be really effective in relaying that. So, and the last thing I want to say is around data. So currently, as we know, folks are very tuned into data. And I just want to make sure that you're thinking heavily around the kind of data that you are collecting and the kind of things that you want to talk about, and if they fully capture the progress of your work. So the third point, and Cecily will talk a little bit more about this, is know your ask. So if you were to receive money, it's really important to understand the impact of new funding on your organization. What things will change if you're to get new funding, what opportunities will open up. And it's really important to spend time sitting with that question and really making sure that you have a good answer when you're responding to a new funder. And the second one is setting up infrastructure to receiving new funding. So ensuring that you're prepared to receive money, but you also have the organizational ability to absorb money and spend it down strategically. You want to make sure that if you were to get money for the first time, you're not squandering that opportunity for the future. So really think through what systems and organizational practices you'll need to implement so that you can effectively handle a new amount of money. So I'll pass it on to Cecily.
Yeah, so I see that a question came into the Q&A. What is a programmatic goal? So a programmatic goal is essentially a goal that is aligned and is specific to your program or your mission. So if there's a specific program that you want to implement, or if there's a specific mission that you have, you need to set a goal that is aligned and specific for that program. So that way, like Benja was saying, you can work backwards. And that's a great segue into setting your budget and knowing your ask. So I have a picture here about the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's really important about setting your budget. So, once, like Benja was talking about, once you've kind of done the legwork to really know your mission, know where you want to go, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's really, really important for then to set the budget. So if you are set up and you've set up the infrastructure to be able to withstand new funding, you need to set your budget, which is knowing your ask, right? So you can't just ask for $100,000 just to ask for $100,000. Everybody would love $100,000, but what are you going to do with that 100,000? Why do you specifically need that much money? What exactly is going to go into spending this down? How are you going to strategically use that money to further your mission and get you closer to your end goal? So knowing your ask is going to be very important. And this is about also sustainability of sustaining that money, specifically with grants, right? But also in general, when you're getting individual donations, you're getting sponsorships, people who are funding you, they want to know that their money is going towards something productive and that their money is going towards actually solving the issue. And so that brings me to my next thing is, what is your secret sauce, right? So why are you as an organization best primed to really accomplish this goal? What is that extra thing that your organization offers that the other organizations in the area don't offer? Or what are you offering in addition to the other organizations in your area? How are you coordinating between different organizations? How are you specifically solving this crisis and justifying your funding? So again, like Benja was saying, you got to look ahead in order to work backwards and then make your ask and know your ask, because justifying that funding and having that strategy is going to be really important for the sustainability of that funding. So we can go to the next slide, and I believe we have a poll question that is also going to come up here. So I'll give a moment for that. There we go. Yeah. So we also wanted to get I think this is this first question. It's the second question. Yeah. Are you the person in charge of fundraising at your organization? Again, so it looks like based on the last poll, we've got a little bit more than half of the folks here have never fundraised, but we want to get a sense now of the people who said yes, or maybe those who said no, who is in charge of fundraising at the organization? Is it you? Are you in this call? Just to get a sense of who we're talking to and what the audience is like. So we'll give a couple more seconds for that. Thanks to everyone for being here. Okay, so this is interesting. So most of the folks that are in this call, looks like 70% of the folks are not in charge of fundraising at the organization, but 30% are. So it looks like folks are trying to get involved with fundraising or just know more about it. So that's really great. We do have in this next section that I talk about, we're going to talk about different revenue streams and different ways that you can obtain funding or just resources for your organization to help you further your mission. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so types of funds to raise. So we'll talk about grants here. Again, we're not going to go into the specifics. This is very high level, but there are really two types of grants. I mean, there's different types, but two main types of grants that you can obtain for your organization. One is a restricted grant, and that is important to note that it can be time, place, or purpose restrictive. So it can be used for during a specific time, only for a specific state or a specific place, or only used for a specific program. Regardless, this grant, as per the grant agreement that you sign with the organization, it dictates that you're only allowed to use the funding that is given to you by the funder for a specific purpose. So a restrictive grant is just that, it is restrictive. And that's why when folks are talking about, this position is funded under a grant, that is a restrictive grant where the money that that position is coming from is only supposed to be used for that program and thus that position, right? And then an unrestricted is exact opposite, where it is not restrictive. So you can use that for general operating support, but it is important to note that unrestricted grants from private foundation, oftentimes you really can't use that money for lobbying. So that is important to note, that private foundations often don't allow that funding to be used for lobbying on the Hill. Now, again, we won't go into the specifics, but 501c3s and C4s do have different expectations and regulations as per the IRS for how grants and funding can be used. So make sure you're staying up to compliance with that. But C4s can fund C3s with limitations. We'll go to the next slide. And the second thing is individual donations. So this can be estate gifts, this can be cash donations, which is what most people think of, donating either hard cash or donating on the website via a website form, and also in-kind gifts. And I will go further into in-kind gifts on the next slide. But this is another type of funding that you can obtain. This is like your crowdfunding, your GoFundMes, any of those cash donations that come through, those are gifts that you can obtain. Also estate gifts. So estate is kind of like a broad term. This can be leftover funds from any of the liquidation of someone's essentially their estate after they've passed away. And a lot of times these folks may try to coordinate that before they pass away. And sometimes someone is dedicated to coordinate that after this person has passed away as per their will. So, sometimes that estate may be $10,000, $15,000. So having something on your website to coordinate that and having a staff member to coordinate that is going to be really important for making that process as easy as possible. So those are big chunks of money that you can get from individuals. And these can be through campaigns. So if you set up a campaign, like an annual campaign, unless you make that form restrictive of, hey, donating to this will go towards this thing, which does make those funds restrictive. So you have to be very careful about that. They can be unrestricted funds. So, hey, donate to my organization so we can achieve our mission. Those are unrestricted funds. We can go to the next slide and talk about sponsorships and in-kind gifts. So I kind of lumped sponsorships and in-kind gifts kind of in the same. They're not the same, but they're very similar. So there's different types of sponsorships you can obtain. So there are financial sponsorships where I have an example here where you can have a sponsorship package for an event. So say you're planning an event, you're planning your annual event, and you need to get sponsorships for it. You can have different tiers where you have a gold level, silver level, and a bronze level, and the gold is the most expensive. silver, and bronze, and you give them different benefits based on how much they donate. And then usually they call it the title sponsor. The title sponsor donates the most, and usually they have contributed a significant amount of money to make the event happen. But, there's an example there of what a sponsorship package could look like. And you may be thinking, who's going to sponsor? This is going back to that relationship building piece. Go to your local organizations. Some local organizations, they may be willing to sponsor you, especially if you're just getting started. Network with your community, build those relationships, see if they're able to give you sponsorships of $1,000, $1,500. Start small and then build your way up. And then there's also in-kind gifts. So if you're planning an annual fundraiser event like a gala with an auction, in-kind gifts are really, 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 really helpful for making that happen. Everybody has heard of an auction or seen an auction before, especially auctions that are facilitated within your state, and you do have to check your state regulations with this because auctions are not legal in every state. So don't just put on an auction without checking for compliance in your state. That is important to note. But if you decide to put on an auction, getting in-kind gifts of donations to help make that happen is really important. And usually those are physical gifts or their services. So, a local massage therapy organization may donate 3 massages, right? And so you would then set your the gift at the minimum, which is the value of that massage. So say they donate 3 massages at $500 each. That means that massage therapy organization donated a $1,500 gave a $1,500 donation in-kind gifts. It may be a lawyer, so another in-kind gift is services and time and expertise. Like a lawyer could do pro bono services. A doctor could be, being be head of the medical tent for a festival or something of the like, and provide medical services. A graphic designer could design a logo as an in-kind gift because they're providing their expertise, and these are all in-kind gifts. It's their services or physical items. And organizations, you have to ask, or you'll never know. So making those connections with different organizations in your community first, and then branching out is a great way, not only to get involved with your community in different ways, but giving them that opportunity to show up for you, because they often don't know that's an opportunity unless you present it to them. So having both of those options, presenting them with a sponsorship, hey, would you like to sponsor us for $1,000? They're like, no, we can't afford that, but we can offer you free wine from our winery. So they donate 6 cases of wine for an event as an in-kind gift. And we'll go to the next slide. So a great example of using in-kind gifts, as I was saying earlier, is an auction. So the first step would be, again, set your budget. How much is it going to cost to put on this, event? So set your budget. How much is it going to cost? Do your best to get your sponsorships to cover the entire cost of the event. So if it costs you $15,000 to put on the event, you need at least $15,000 in sponsorships, because the goal of this fundraising event is not to lose money. You don't want to be in the red going into the event. You want to be in the black. So you want every single dollar that you make that day from the auction to go towards your mission. And that is why having the in-kind gifts is going to be really important, because you're not spending additional money purchasing items for the auction. So having this combination of both financial sponsorships and in-kind gifts can be really helpful. And get creative. An organization may want to print your brochures for free. A local church may want to offer their parking lot as free parking for your event. A venue may want to offer you a deep discount. You have to make those connections and ask in order for that connection to happen. So this is just kind of a step-by-step, and we will send you the slides after this so you all can kind of read through this more in depth, but that's kind of like a high-level overview of what it could look like to have in-kind gifts in addition to financial sponsorships kind of supplement and really help you fundraise for your organization while building on that relationship piece. And I'll hand it over to Benja.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so now we'll talk a little bit about how to fundraise. Thanks, Cecily, for sharing some of the different fundraising initiatives that are out there. I think as you mentioned, it really talks about your budget and kind of the amount that you're looking to aim to recoup and to raise. So that really can help dictate the kind of campaign that you're looking to fund. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit now about prospecting and finding prospective donors. Research can really be one of the more laborious parts of the prospecting and fundraising cycle. However, the more time and effort you really put into prospecting, the more it can set you up for success. So, one way to do that is looking at similar organizations to yours and who donates to them. So another way to look at that is, look geographically, look via subject area or topic, and then also look at the funder's priorities. So really try your best to cast a wide net and really capture a lot of different organizations that are in that field, in that general sphere. Another one too is identifying local businesses who are also big philanthropists and want to help. And as Cecily mentioned earlier, you never know until you ask. There might be a lot of community members who are willing to donate their time, their services, their in-kind gifts to help make a successful event for you. Secondly is browsing public information such as 990 tax forms and also browsing foundation websites. So a good resource, and we will share at the very end a few resources that we find helpful. But some that I find helpful currently are using Candid and ProPublica, and I use these primarily to really put together a cohesive profile for each of the funders. Um, you really want to understand their motivations, their histories, where their strategic priorities lie, and really what their interest in that field is currently. Thirdly, is more of an operational thing, but is sign up for newsletters from organizations and foundations that track trends in philanthropy. So don't be afraid to set up a separate account specific to your development team that can field some of these newsletters and updates, because you really want to try your best to um, maintain a good idea of what the world of philanthropy is currently going on. And that does sort of talk, that does sort of tie into our fourth bullet, which is attend webinars, and talk with other colleagues and organizers to understand the current donor landscape. So much like the current nonprofit world is in a lot of uncertainty, so is the world of philanthropy. So make sure that you're talking with others, you're workshopping, you're getting into communion, you're having coffee, you're setting up calls to really try your best to keep your finger on the pulse. You really want to see what's happening, what are shifts that are happening, what are certain fields or certain terms that are being used, what are donors interested in, and a lot of that really comes down to that relationship building with both the funders, but also with some of your current networks. So you're really going to want to try to put your best efforts into understanding that and really trying to track that. Secondly is so once you've got a nice list of donors or foundations, community foundations, what have you, that you've identified, you want to start to set realistic goals of the funders that you think you can sort of talk to and contact. So I recommend a good system to effectively track these funders would be having a bucket sort of for funders that are quote hot, funders that are warm, and then funders that are cold, with the ultimate goal of stewarding relationships and prospecting and moving them from cold to warm to hot to ultimately becoming a current funder. So funders who are local and you might have a prior primary connection with could be in sort of the hot bucket. Funders in the warm bucket would be those who you may have met at a conference, you had a few conversations, maybe they're currently engaged in some sort of priority shift or a strategic reorganization, but you may not have a solid contact. Those folks could go into your warm bucket. And then lastly, funders or donors that are cold would be those who are sort of quote big players in the field, where you don't have any sort of contact with currently, but you want to ensure that they're sort of kept in your in your radar. Um, Secondly, work with your network and board members to identify any contacts. So don't be afraid to start local, as Cecily mentioned, and really work within your own network and see what connections folks may have that you can leverage. Try speaking with your current funders and donor bases about putting you in contact. I would only recommend doing that if you have a good, strong partnership with some of your current funders, but really you want to start local and exhaust your current and local folks before you start to sort of start cold calling. And then thirdly is try to be creative to find opportunities to meet with program officers and staff. This can be some of the more difficult parts of fundraising, I'm sure, as people have found. But try to be creative. Think about visiting foundations in different states if you're able to, if you have the budget. I know in a previous slide, Cecily had put up some of the states where a lot of foundations are located, particularly, California, New York, New Jersey's up there. So if you're able to, plan some site visits to meet with funders in person, parse through different conferences that you attend or you have, may have attended in the past to sort of find program officers who are also attending. And then a third one that's very useful is once you've identified those hot, warm, and cold funders, make sure that your staff are aware of who they are. Make sure that you're working with your staff to also be stewards of these potential relationships. But also assure your staff that they won't be the primary contacts. However, they can put you in contact. So, try your best to really be creative to find opportunities here. Next slide. So let's say that you've had a productive conversation with the funder and they've asked you to submit a formal concept note, or also you're monitoring a funder's website and you see that they've opened up opportunities to apply for a grant, for example. Usually they'll provide their own template. However, it's important to be concise with your wording, keep it high level. You want to provide a fairly comprehensive overview of how how you're going to spend the money, succinctly sort of demonstrate your work. This is really an opportunity to open the conversation with the funder. So if you're going to use data, use it to really back up context or back up an argument, but make sure you're using data sparingly. Secondly is be compelling and confident. So approach it really from the lens that best matches your funder. And this is sort of why research and good identification of your funders is really key. Because the more you know about them, the stronger your concept note will be. If you understand their priorities, the things that interest them, where they're hoping to take their work, then your concept note can hopefully align your work with theirs more, much better. Thirdly is always remember your audience and who you're writing for. As I mentioned, you want to coherently describe the issue, your plan to solve it, what your role in solving it is, and where their impact will be best felt. This is really the opportunity to get your foot in the door, and oftentimes there will be more opportunities to discuss your project more in depth. So just try not to get too into the weeds with the concept note. Next slide. So I just want to talk about the importance of good organization when it comes to tracking, prospecting new donors, as well as tracking current grant that you may be juggling. So really setting up good systems on the onset is extremely important. So the more effort you're able to put into setting up a good system, which means you have more time then to spend on relationship building and strategizing with your funder base. So really figure out what tracking system works best for you and your organization, and feel free to scale. And I know, as I mentioned, we'll be sharing some resources at the end of the call to hopefully help you all sort of figure out what system works best for you. So the first point is, try your best to automate a lot of these processes. There's a lot of softwares, and we're also going to list some free softwares that help you to automate that and really sort of reduce the mental load of having to think about upcoming due dates and check-ins and things like that. Secondly, is keep an updated calendar that tracks due dates of concept notes, proposals, reports, and check-in calls. Being organized and aware of these deadlines gives you and your program team more time to think deeply about them and to allow you to rewrite and draft and redraft them so that they're stronger in the end. And the third one I'm going to mention is keeping an open channel with funders will really help to strengthen your working relationships. Good organization allows you to streamline this communication process. So if you have a big win, it should be an easy lift to reach out and to send this to your donor base, to your funders. It shouldn't be an entirely different process that you have to stop and then start a new thing. You should really hopefully make it so that your impact happens or your win happens, and then that button is easily clicked where you're sending it to the folks who need to know. They're kept in the loop. And then the fourth point is really spending time to be strategic about touch points with funders. Be invested in their successes and their wins, the things that interest them. but also be sure to relay your wins. They want to know where their contributions are making the most impact. And another one that's important is don't forget to mention and keep your prospective funders in the loop. You're constantly cultivating and stewarding relationships, so make sure you're including the folks who are sort of on the fringe of the movement but are interested to learn more. And I'd argue that good tracking systems and good systems that you create will help you sort of manage all of this. So next slide, please. So now we're going to briefly talk about grant writers. I know there was a previous question about this, so we're going to spend the next few slides discussing this. So next slide. So when do you hire a grant writer? So here are a few things we recommend. The first is, you have an established mission and you know your ask. The second one, and you have a specific project in mind or a budget. Second one would be you're an established nonprofit. The third one would be you've identified some grants that you think would be a good fit for your organization that you want to pursue. The fourth one is having the infrastructure to handle that period of growth, as we mentioned earlier. So you're set up, you've thought through what it's going to take, the kinds of folks you may have to hire to bring on board, and things like that. However, this is also before you have the funds to hire a full-time development team or development staff member. So really, I think a grant writer is thinking about a specific need or skill set that you're hoping to fill. Is this a capacity thing? Do you have a lot of prospective grants that you're thinking about, but not enough time to apply for them? Is this a skill set that you don't currently have? And I want you to think critically about that. And I think Cecily will take the next one, but I do see Dee's hand is up.
Yeah, Dee's hand is raised.
That's by mistake. Sorry. Carry on.
That's okay.
But a quick time check. We have a few more minutes.
Yes. We have only really a few more slides left. We'll break kind of breeze through this last section here, especially since you all will get these slides. There's resources all the way at the end, but I'll briefly talk about the grant writers. So with grant writers, there are some pros and the cons. We can go to the next slide here. So the pros of a grant writer, again, like Benja was saying, this is, as you're starting to get started, looking at scaling your organization and needing to get like fund programs that you want to do, but you're not able to fund a development team just yet. And the pros of a grant writer is that they're able to help you get your funding pool to the next stage of growth for your nonprofit, which is great. Again, you want to set up that infrastructure before you even entertain that. And another pro is that they're able to solely focus on writing grants. We all know nonprofits, everyone's wearing 5 hats. These people are contracted to do just exactly that. So they're kind of laser focused on the task at hand. We can go to the next bullet. Some cons is that they're not full-time staff. And they have other clients to balance. So they're not able to dedicate time figuring out your mission, your vision. So there is a lot of legwork that is required to get them up to speed. So that way they can effectively help you write those grants and get those grants for your organization. So those can be some cons, and also overall costs, they can get a little bit costly. We do want to note that there are some grant writers out there that may try to charge almost like a commission fee for grants. We want to warn that that is not ethical. So if a grant writer is asking for like 5% of a grant that they get your organization, that's not ethical. Fee for service should be upfront and it should be stated clearly in the contract. There should not be any hidden fees or anything like that. They may charge for the amount of things that they give you per month, or they may charge you a flat fee for being on call for the whole month as per their contract. But they should not be taking part of the grant money that they secure your organization. 100% of that money should be going towards your organization. So we'll go to the next slide here. So yeah, some different resources that are available. We'll kind of click through here. CRMs are really critical for the success of stewarding your donors. You can keep clicking through. There's 3 different, yeah, there we go. they're really important for the success of your organization. I highly recommend getting a CRM. There are different options available if you're just now getting started and you don't have a lot of money. There are free options. There are also affordable platforms like GiveButter and DonorBox and Donately. And then there's expensive platforms that are able to house a lot of data. They're much more robust, much more complicated, and much more expensive, but they are really helpful for when your organization is ready for that stage. But if you're just starting out, there are some resources there. We can go to the next slide. Some resources for grant tracking. Instrumental is really helpful for that. It is a little bit expensive. It is a paid platform. Like Benja was saying earlier, grant prospecting, ProPublica, it's like a news site. It is free to use, so that is a free resource that you can use. Donor prospecting, you can use Candid and GuideStar. iWave, also paid, and Donor Search is also paid, but those are really good resources to use. And I see a question came in. A CRM is a customer relations management database, or just like a donor management database. So you have every single person that donates, you have essentially their information, and you're able to kind of manage all of those donors and all of those profiles within one platform. And you can pull lists, you can pull report, you can pull data. It's basically a hub to organize all of your donor information or your member organization information, however your organization is set up. We can go to the next slide here. And project management tools, again, you'll get these slides, but Trello, Asana, again, Instrumental, Monday.com, Excel, yes, you can use it, but know when to scale out of Excel. Excel is great for some things, but sometimes having a project management platform to balance a lot of different things is going to be really helpful. Basecamp and Gantify, Microsoft Planner, if you have Microsoft Suite, and Adobe Analytics is also really helpful for analyzing your data to help with your KPIs and knowing your KPIs. So analyzing like link clicks, how many times people are clicking links in an email, donations from different emails you're getting, survey and feedback results, making sure you're keeping that to keep up to date, where your donors are, tracking geography, tracking the different types of organizations and their occupation, who's donating to your organization, who do they work for, why are these people supporting your organization. All that is going to be really, really, really helpful for optimizing your fundraising strategy. So with that, I know that we're like 3 minutes over time, but that still leaves 7 minutes for a Q&A.
Yeah, feel free to, if you have any questions, to send it to the Q&A box that's below on your screen. If you have any inquiring questions, please send them there so we can answer them. Just give a round of applause to Cecily and Benja for their presentation today. Uh, what a phenomenal job. And I think we have one question just came in.
Yeah, so it looks like the question is, would you say that AI is a good tool for finding prospects? Um, so I mean, everyone has their thoughts and feelings about AI as it is rapidly evolving, and it is a very new landscape. Personally, I would say that I would be very cautious with using AI to find prospects. Some of these tools, like someone said in the chat, GuideStar has been around for a very long time, and that kind of historical data and making those connections is something that AI is just, it's not there yet. So I would be very cautious and very intentional about how you're using AI, and I would just say that in general. So my advice would be, possibly, but I would be very cautious and stick to a lot of the tools that are already existing, because it is arduous, but once you find those tools and you start to learn how to use them, they are very, very helpful for you. Do you have anything to add, Benja?
No, I think you handled it well. I mean, it's sort of uncharted territory. But as you mentioned, being cautious, but maybe for preliminary, but certainly double check and triple check with your own eyes if possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is uncharted territory, and right now, there's a lot of uncharted territory with, the way that the fundraising world works. You know, me, Benja, and Kristen is our, supervisor, and she is here today. I mean, if she wants to say hi, she can. But she's also been a
Hey,
great,
everyone.
partner in helping us. We're constantly talking about the fundraising landscape. It is very, very chaotic right now. Kristen, if you want to add anything and introduce yourself, you can.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Fund Development Director here at the Coalition. Cecily and Benja are the amazing other parts of our three-part development team here. And just really appreciate all your great questions. We've answered some of them in there. And as Dee put in the chat, if you have any follow-up questions, please send it to Dee and we'll be able to get back to you on that as well. But thank you so much for attending.
Alrighty. Once again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today for our Fundraising Sustainability One-on-One webinar. We hope you're leaving with practical tools and renewed inspiration to sustain your tenant and resident-led work. Your leadership matters. And learning how to fund and grow that leadership is key to building long-term power and change. Don't forget to join us again on July 31st for our next session on Marketing and Branding 101, where we'll explore how to tell your story, elevate your work, and attract more support. And side notes, all webinar recordings will be sent out to all registered participants, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, help us spread the word about the Training Institute for tenants and residents. The more we build together, the stronger our movement becomes. Thank you again for being with us today. Have a great day, everyone.